Welcome to the CU 2.0 podcast.
Hi, and welcome to the CU 2.0 podcast with big new ideas about credit unions and conversations about innovative technology with credit union and fintech leaders. This podcast is brought to you by Quillo, the real-time loan syndication network for credit unions, and by your host, longtime credit union and financial technology journalist Robert McGarvey. And now, the CU 2.0 podcast with Robert McGarvey.
I'm not going to explain to you in any detail at all what TrustGrid does. And that is because in the show, Joe Gleinser, a co-founder of the Austin, Texas company, does a much, much better job of explaining than I ever could. But here's the fact. TrustGrid's tools, which enable secure connections of fintech apps with banking systems, are on the job at a couple thousand U.S. credit unions, says Gleinser. Why haven't you heard of the company? Simple. That's because TrustGrid does not sell to credit unions. It sells to fintechs, and it's the fintechs that pay for the service. TrustGrid says it delivers fast, reliable fintech networks at scale. And that's why it's a leading provider in a space that is crucial to the safe, secure, reliable flow of financial data. Understand, this is not a technical show. You don't need to put a propeller hat on to listen to the show. But listen up and you'll hear why TrustGrid is important and why so many credit unions and banks use its tools. Listen up.
Tell me about your product and why it matters to credit unions or how it can help credit unions.
Well, that's a good question because we don't really sell to credit unions. We sell to the fintech providers that service credit unions. So our customers are the Q2s, the Alchemies, the Mahalos of the world. They install us at the credit unions and community banks around the country to connect their core banking systems to the fintech applications that typically live in the cloud or large private data centers. And we're responsible for making sure that that connectivity is up 100% of the time so that the credit union customers can check their account balances, can pay bills, all the online functionality in those platforms. And we keep it secure. So we're responsible for end-to-end encryption of that data from the core to the application.
Well, so the credit union benefits from this, although it doesn't pay for it.
Correct.
Yeah, as you know, I know credit unions, the core is sacred. They don't want it to be violated. And historically, that's why there was some reluctance to bring in many fintech vendors, for instance. It's
right.
And what you're providing is safety with that connection. You can make the connection, but be safe. Now, how do you do that?
So our solution is a modern, what they call software-defined network. So unlike the days of buying Cisco boxes and putting them in place, spending a lot on hardware, on a support contract, and then having to manage that device to throw a tremendous amount of time at keeping it patched and secure, our solution is highly automated. And so it's a piece of software that runs at the data centers of the credit unions and in the cloud or private cloud environments at the fintech. And then it's completely managed and automated solution. So it gets patched automatically. Any security issues that come up are resolved automatically. Takes almost no time to operate. And so we achieve better security, better reliability, and then better on a lower cost platform overall.
And who sells the credit union on allowing this implementation into their core? And I realize that you're not charging, but the credit union has to be persuaded that this makes perfect sense.
So it's really a two-stage process, right? The vast majority of the benefit confers to the fintech because historically the fintech would have purchased millions of dollars worth of Cisco gear, hired a team of network engineers, been busy around the clock in deploying and maintaining and patching that infrastructure. And so we convince the fintech that this is a superior solution at a better price. And then they actually mandate the installation for all their customers. Now, of course, the credit unions get a vote And so we typically will engage with those credit unions one-on-one and explain the solution, how it works, our security, our compliance, the history of our installation, the pervasiveness of our solution. And then they decide that that's adequate, and then they proceed with the installation.
At a credit union, what level person are you usually communicating with in this discussion?
I think as you know, there's as many different sizes and flavors of credit unions as there are colors in the rainbow. And so, our primary points of contact are going to be someone on the IT team, but then some of the credit unions are going to outsource their IT to a managed service provider. And we'll typically then work with somebody on the finance or operations team who oversees that relationship, and will then coordinate with that outsourced provider.
Ballpark, how many credit unions are your tools in the United States?
A few thousand at least right now.
Wow.
A few thousand more banks as well.
So even if it's 2,000, you got a big chunk of credit union land.
We do. Yeah, we have a tremendous responsibility in the American banking system, the community banking system, to keep those connections up and safe each day.
Do you ever encounter a credit union that says, I just don't trust this? I mean, you must encounter that. So you must have a way of saying, well, you should trust it because.
Right. Yeah, there's really two big objections, and we get these from the smaller side of the credit union space and then the very large side, and they're just very different in how they approach it. The very large side, of course, typically has many dedicated personnel responsible for the security and operation of their networks and infrastructure. And we have heard everything from, it has to be Cisco, we're not going to do it. We won't ever go with a software-defined solution. We believe that MPLS is a better solution. And all those objections are things that we've worked through, dozens or hundreds of times now. On the smaller side, frequently, because there isn't the sort of staffing resources you'll have at a larger credit union, it's really just a familiarity issue. How does this really work? Is this possible? Why is it different than what we've done in the past? And all those objections we can overcome. From a trust perspective, what you find with TrustGrid is that we're going to have an extremely robust set of security controls, and then, of course, our annual SOC 2 Type 2 and SOC 3 compliance audits that really prove out everything that we claim about the product from a security and compliance perspective.
Now, how is your product superior to the Cisco product?
Yeah, so Cisco and the way that they still do much of their network infrastructure today, and it's not just Cisco, right? It's most of the major networking vendors. They started off many decades ago with a hardware engineering solution. It was the only way that they could do this. So a bunch of very smart hardware engineers custom design a piece of hardware to perform these tasks. They, of course, write software at the same time, but it's a fairly incredible engineering accomplishment to get that device out and get it to the market. They typically rely on third-party resellers or implementers to do the actual, or the credit unions and the fintechs themselves in this space, to do the actual configuration, which is a very manual, very difficult, sometimes tedious task. And obviously has a tremendous amount of room for human error there as well, both in the initial configuration and in ongoing changes or in patching and maintaining them. And so what you have is a very expensive product, a very expensive annual commitment to that networking vendor in terms of a support contract that entitles you to updates, the latest version with the latest security fixes or perhaps new features sometimes. And then a team of individuals who are, we refer to it oftentimes as painting the Golden Gate Bridge, right? That when you have a large footprint deployed, by the time you're done fixing whatever was broken yesterday or applying a patch, it's time to start doing it again, because it can take them literally months to make these changes. And so by taking a software first approach and a hardware agnostic approach, we really simplify the solution overall. And so our solution operates on any what we call an x86. So your typical computer that's running on your desk right now probably could run the TrustGrid software, runs it very quickly. We use the Linux operating system as the base for our solution. And then we've built a tremendous amount of automation tools. So things like patching that frequently either require expensive third-party tools to patch a fleet of those hardware devices at scale. We do all that native to our solution and can do it in a way that's far superior to what those tools can offer, because we can manage the entire infrastructure. Any sort of security vulnerability or configuration change that has to be made, we can make a change across thousands of devices in a few minutes, and do it in a methodology that's built into the system that we refer to as a blue-green deployment. So you're able to actually test these solutions both before you start the rollout to make sure it will work, and then in real time as you're rolling it out. So that the benefits there, you're just much better uptime, much better security than those legacy solutions. The efficiency also really can't be beat because we're doing it on a software basis. We're doing it with automation. It's not rooms full of expensive people that have, quite frankly, better things to be doing, more important tasks, more difficult tasks. And so we're able to free up the time from those people to go tackle those bigger issues.
You don't work with the giant banks, right?
Our largest customers have thousands of customers. And if you look at the top of the American banking system, right, few of those companies will outsource their digital banking products to a third party. Some of them do. But yeah, if they have in-house digital banking development and infrastructure, that's kind of outside of our purview. So we're really working with that community banking, community credit union space. That's 99% of the customers that we have.
You'll remember some years ago, NCUA said to credit unions, "Hey guys, you're responsible for any security failures on the part of your fintechs and all other vendors." And that kind of shook up a lot of credit union people, because historically they would blame it on the fintech. Hey, it's not our problem.
Mm-hmm.
And NCUA said, no, you are responsible for it. So you are providing this security insulation for the credit union and the fintech, right?
Correct. Yeah. For our part of a very complex piece of infrastructure, yeah, we secure this networking component that connects those fintech applications into the core banking systems at the credit union data centers.
You ought to be very popular in credit union land. Because this is the stuff that keeps a lot of credit union executives sleepless.
Yeah, especially in this little niche that we operate, we've heard it referred to by many in the credit union space as a black box, right? A lot of the security focus they have is within their four walls on the credit union side. And at the fintech side, it's within their application environments. Well, who is responsible for this middle piece that's pushing these highly secure transactions over the public internet in most every case, right? A very insecure place. How do we make sure that is going to be secure from end to end? And so from a popularity perspective, we're one of the largest providers of these services in the country. We've had a lot of success, but as you can tell, we're also a highly technical product with a lot of nuance to it. And so we're famous in limited circles, I would say. You'll never see us on the news. You'll never read about us in the paper. We won't be a lead story, but we have a really important job to do every day.
Yeah, it's hard. I'm pretty good at taking most technology and simplifying it. I might actually make the creators of it sick with my simplifications, but it enables me to talk about it with many credit union executives. Yours is, I'm having trouble coming up with the simple-minded description of it.
You're not the only one.
It's really important. It's really important. Trust me on this, guys. It's really important, but I can't simplify this. It intrigues me because this is kind of an enigmatic solution, but I fully believe the credit unions and fintechs need this. They absolutely need this or something that does the same thing.
Yeah, you're totally right. They have to have a good solution for this problem, or else their members, their customers are going to be affected terribly, either not able to conduct their online banking, which obviously, as we know, is one of, if not the most important branch at the credit unions today, or even worse, right, suffer a breach because of a lack of security in this infrastructure.
Give me an example of something that your software does that would thrill a credit union if they knew what was happening.
Right. So one common challenge that today's credit unions experience, especially sort of in that mid-sized credit union and above, is they emphasize the need for uptime, right? Banks get holidays, but they better be up all the rest of the time. And as we know, in the modern world, technology is just not going to work all the time. And so many of these credit unions have invested tremendous amounts of money in operating multiple independent data centers that can fail over, right? If your primary data center is experiencing a problem, or if the core at that site's experiencing a problem, you can fail over to your backup and you can continue operations as if nothing had happened. That becomes really difficult to do when you're engaging with your digital and mobile banking solution, or your account origination solution, or now we're seeing a lot of data integration providers come out that do this. And so one thing that TrustGrid's able to do is monitor the health of the internet in real time, detect a healthy versus an unhealthy connection, an issue that might be affecting the performance of your customer experience, member experience online, and then automatically fail that over to that secondary data center. And even more important, if you get down in the guts of it, be able to fail back quickly and easily to the primary data center when the problem is resolved. And so, instead of that process requiring hours of manual work, of it being, a dreaded day, this can happen fully automatically, subject to the constraints that you give us ahead of time. When do you want to fail over? How does your specific disaster recovery plan work? And what criteria do you have to make that decision? All that is configured in the solution, and the failover happens automatically. And so if you're working with a provider that is up and running, but there's no data being displayed because your core can't be accessed, we can solve that problem in seconds.
Are you involved in core conversions?
We don't do any core conversions.
No, I know you do. You don't, but you might be working with vendors who do.
We do work with some vendors that offer core conversion services, and we play a small role in that. Usually at the conclusion of that, they're cutting over their online solutions to their new core, and we play a role in that. It's similar almost to moving of data centers or moving to the cloud, or any large infrastructure overhaul. That they all look the same to us.
So if credit unions are merging and their data is merging, you could play a role in that too, through a vendor, obviously.
Through a vendor, and I would say it's a limited role there. I don't want to oversell what we do, because this is primarily a networking solution. However, because the nature of the solution, we do offer a variety of tools that are helpful during that core conversion process to the technologists that are really in the guts of doing that.
Do you offer tools that, credit unions and banks have wrestled with employee access to secure data when they're off-site? In other words, not inside one of their buildings, not using a company-issued computer.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any tools that help with that problem?
That really is outside of the scope of what we do, except as it relates to the remote access within the fintech itself, and how the fintech is able to remotely manage these systems that have access to that data. And so we have a lot of tools there that give them highly restricted, very granular permission level access to the systems to which they can then access that data. But it's not for the employees of the credit unions or banks themselves.
Okay. So in other words, if I'm an Austin online banking provider and one of my credit union customers' system seems to go in hell in a handbasket, I'll be trying to look at what's happening sitting in Austin, so accessing the whole thing remotely. And you provide tools where everybody can feel more secure about this.
That's correct.
Is that
yep?
Okay, good.
It's a category of technology that has a really great name you're going to like, called ZTNA, or Zero Trust Network Access, and it kind of flips the traditional remote access methodology, the security methodology, on its head. And in days past, you might be using a VPN client on your laptop or your desktop, right? And you would remotely log into this network. And what you would see then is all of the systems, all of the data for which that network was configured to give you access. And because of the complexity of it, in most cases, the default there is to access everything, is to have access to systems that you probably shouldn't have access to, that you have no need to have access to. And that presents a huge security risk, even though these are trusted individuals and established businesses. Why bother even opening that door? And so in a zero trust model, we start with the opposite approach. You have access to nothing by default. And then for you to get access to individual systems, that's a rule that has to be created and can be tied down to specific users or specific groups of users, like a network operations team or an IT support team. And even get more granular to say that some of those staff members might have access to certain credit unions during certain times a day from certain locations on certain devices, but not have access to those same systems if some of those rules don't match to the current access request.
Now, if a credit union executive says, okay, how can you prove to me that you're as secure as you say you are? How do you respond to that?
Yeah, we get the question a lot, right? And it's both a highly technical question and then a business question, because we know security is both equal parts technology and process. And we're an open book, right? We are happy to get that question. We love getting it because we love talking about the security solution that we've built here. And so we can go as deep technologically into the security as anybody wants to do. And probably a credit union executive, in the technology side wants to go very deep. On the business side, they're going to focus more on the audits that we undergo, the frequency of those audits, the pen tests that we do, et cetera. On the technology side, we can talk about encryption algorithms. We can talk about private key rotation. We can talk about all the public key infrastructure, the encryption infrastructure we manage and we've built. We can talk about the mutual authentication on these tunnels. And if to a knowledgeable person, all those words that might not mean a whole lot to you or to a listener, will stand up to be the absolute best of breed security practices in the world. And then going back to that automation we talked about before, and kind of a key advantage, when you buy a piece of hardware engineered to do a certain thing, well, if you're going to really change how that system functions because a new security threat has emerged, you've got to change the hardware and the software. It's a big, heavy lift. Because we're a software-based solution built on open standards and highly automated, we can adapt to new threats in a way that no legacy system ever could. And that's, every single day we are analyzing the latest threat intelligence from the federal government and other providers, and anything that could possibly affect that network, we can adapt to across these thousands and thousands of systems right away. An adaptation that might take a legacy provider months to adapt to is a matter of minutes for us.
And if a credit union says, okay, tell me the names of some credit unions that I'm familiar with that you're operating in today, how do you respond to that?
Yeah, it's an easy question because the number one thing that we do for a living is keep data secure and data private. And so these are our customers, if that makes sense, right?
No, that's why I'm asking. This is an awkward thing. These are not your customers. These are Alchemy's.
They're not my customers. That's not my data to share in at any time. And so we would refer that request back to a customer. It's essentially a reference request is how we look at it on the business side. And if my customer wanted to share that information, well, they're welcome to do so. But if they don't, that's entirely up to them.
Okay, so the scenario is that the credit union is thinking about installing Alchemy tools, and Alchemy wants to use your set of tools as part of this process. So if I'm the customer, I'm actually making a deal not with you, but with Alchemy. So it makes sense to be directed to Alchemy to tell me what credit unions are you doing this exact same thing with. It's And Alchemy probably would answer that question. I can't speak for them, obviously, but probably.
In much the same way that they would probably answer that question during the sales process for their solution. And that comes up. Who else uses your digital banking solution gets answered in very similar way to who else uses your TrustGrid networking solution.
And in credit union land, the reference that's most important is the credit union executive and institution down the street that I know. If you're in that, okay, now you got my attention. Doesn't mean you have a deal, but you have my attention. So
that's a hard problem to solve when you're getting going and when you have a handful of installations. But 8 years in business here and with thousands of installations, that's gotten easier to answer every year. even if I can't give you specific details, I think our reputation's been established that most folks that are in the space and in this niche know that we're out here, know what we do, and sort of know the scope of what we're able to deliver.
And you also are working with some of these very, very big name fintechs.
Mm-hmm.
Most fintechs on this planet are pretty obscure. You rattled off names that are household names, at least in credit union land. So
that's right, and that's where we started the business was built hand in hand with some of those early customers to solve this problem. And their technical leadership could identify this as a key challenge moving forward, and we're able to then help us design this specifically for this solution. So we've had a lot of success in the space really because of that. We continue to innovate around those challenges that they encounter, and it's a great place for us to be. We love the industry.
My sense is that the bad guys in this equation are in many respects getting much more sophisticated. Some also seem to have nation state sponsorship, for instance, and so they have access to really good tools. I assume you see that you're constantly being probed for vulnerability. True?
Oh yeah, and I wouldn't say it's much different than our customers or than the banking
I'm sure it's
and credit union space. Yeah, we're in this day and age, the American banking system is a huge target for hackers, whatever their origin. Right? Yes, you mentioned nation states or teams beneath those nation states levels, and just opportunistic individuals in areas where hacking a bank is very, very lucrative. And so yeah, we our primary job when we start every day is to make sure that this system is secure and to adapt it to those evolving changes. We see the AI now becoming a very popular toolkit, like it is for many of us in the business world. It's every bit as valuable to those hackers to create better phishing attempts to try to breach the system through people, more sophisticated, more better researched attempts. Certainly, more complex attempts, attempts that might be as opposed to yesterday, where it might be a poorly formatted and poorly spelled email that you get at the accounting team. Now it's a series of probes and then an attack over many weeks or months as they learn more about you, your systems, how you operate, who you work with, how they can impersonate key personnel. So it's an ever evolving challenge for us.
You're based in Austin, right? Austin, Texas.
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
How many states is your software used in, would you say?
I think there isn't a single state that we don't operate in, as well as many of the territories, the U.S. territories. And then in other parts of the business where we're fairly popular in the healthcare space as well, that is international in scope.
Yeah, healthcare is man, they try to keep data private. I don't know that they do a great job of it. And I'm not saying that your tools are not working, but but man, they are obsessive about that.
That's right. And they're every bit as large of a target as the banking sector is. And they treat it with the risk that they should, with the attention that they should.
So it's strange. You're like a giant in this field, but you're also a complete unknown.
And there's benefits to that too, right? It's an important job. It's a job that I think we do well and that we love doing. Yeah, but at the same time, we're not on the agenda for most credit union board meetings or executive team meetings. This has been a topic that frankly most people want to talk about until they have to. There has to be some other large event occurring, like a change of your fintech providers that require you to address this problem. And for that reason, it goes unaddressed, for many, many years. And so there's typically brand new technologies like TrustGrid that are out on the table to consider each time. But you're never going to go home and talk to your wife about it. It's not going to be a dinner room conversation. And it's not an exciting or particularly interesting topic unless you're really in the space.
Well, I would guess that other than the larger credit unions, and let's just say $1 billion and bigger in assets, there's not going to be too many credit union executives can follow the nuances of what you're doing. I don't think. Am I right?
Yeah, no, nor would they want to, right?
Well, right. No, it's
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, sure, I could learn Russian today, but I'm not going to. I don't want to. It's too complicated.
exactly. Yeah, neither would I. It's but yeah, you're going to address this when you have to, right? And there's some key events here, like in the fintech space, as these fintech providers are doing what we're doing. They're adapting to new threats. They're trying to improve efficiency. They're trying to improve the availability, the user experience of the credit union members and how they access it. They're redesigning their infrastructure. Where we've certainly seen a lot of them embrace the public cloud, the Amazon Web Services, and the Microsoft Azures, the Googles of the world, even at the very highest levels. And when they are making those large decisions, that's typically going to impact every part of their infrastructure. And we have a very similar sales pitch to them as the Amazons do to them, which is, do you want to be in the hardware business, or do you want to be in the banking software business? Do you want to focus your time, effort, and energy on producing a better product, on enhancing that user experience, offering more features to the members? Or do you want to deal with this huge chunk of expensive stuff in the back that breaks when you don't want it to, that requires specialized skill sets, that requires a lot of capital expenditure? And it's a very compelling pitch to those application providers, to the software developers. And we have the same thing. Do you want to be in the networking business, or do you want somebody to take care of that problem for you? And that's our expertise. So the folks here have done the vast majority of their careers, and it's a much easier thing to say, hey, let's let the experts take care of this. Let them focus on what they're good at, and we're going to focus on what the credit unions want us to focus on.
Well, I'm thinking as you talk about cloud computing, where 15 years ago, when I would talk with credit unions, senior credit union people about core systems in the cloud, I might as well have asked them to run naked down Fifth Avenue in broad daylight. It's and the answer was, we will never do that. Well, times have changed, and probably you are doing it now, or at least you're thinking about doing it. And do they actually know much about what's happening in the cloud? I don't think so. I think they sit there and say, well, if it's good enough for Amazon, or it's good enough for Microsoft, it's okay, I'll trust them. I think that's what's going on there. It's
yeah, we certainly have seen a tremendous amount of adoption in this space. And banking by its nature is a conservative business. You're going to take your risks very carefully and infrequently, in a very measured way. And cloud computing was a huge risk early on. To be an early adopter in that space meant you were going to really bet a lot on that product becoming mainstream, becoming secure, becoming reliable. And those concerns are far in the past for technologists, especially. Though the nature of technology in banks today, especially the community banking space, is such, it's very difficult for a bank to embrace the public cloud, as we call it, the Amazons and Azures, the cloud computing, because they've made such large investments in these core banking systems that live in a data center. And to move away from those products, as we all know, a core conversion is a pretty dirty phrase in the industry. Nobody does it because they think they're going to get a little better product or a little more efficiency, just because the cost of switching is so high. And so really today, the world we live in is one that we refer to as a hybrid cloud architecture, which means you're still going to have your core in your data centers for many, many years. It's just not economically or technologically feasible to move to the cloud. Yet you still want to embrace the advancements in technology that serve your members better. And we offer the ability to have the best of both worlds. And so those fintech providers that are innovating these new solutions in cloud computing environments, delivering new products to the market, can exist in the cloud, and yet you still get the certainty, the consistency for which you've had decades of experience operating your core in your own data centers, or through a service provider or whomever's hosting that. So you get the advanced technology, and you don't have to make these huge investments in time and energy and money to get into the cloud. And so you really can have it both ways. You can have your cake and eat it too, when you have solutions like TrustGrid that bridge those two very different architectures together.
So when an existing client of yours comes to you and says, okay, we just been adopted by a credit union, does that existing client pay an additional fee to you, or is there some kind of blanket fee there?
The sort of the business that we're in goes back decades, right? This is not a new problem. It's just a new solution to the problem. And so there's a lot of history around this, and the largest core providers in the country and the largest banking technology companies have a long history of charging for that connectivity, going back to the first days of dedicated circuits, and then even more recently what we call MPLS, which is kind of a quasi-dedicated circuit. And so a lot of those guys still maintain those same billing practices, and there's still a substantial amount of cost in providing that solution. And so it's very, very common for there to be a connectivity fee or networking charge or some cost recovery for what they've done in the past and then what they do now. And, obviously we're introducing a lot of cost efficiencies into the market, doing things like using the public internet in place of those MPLS circuits is a big cost savings. And it's one of the benefits that a credit union can achieve is that they can get the performance and security of a quote unquote private solution, a dedicated solution, while using the same connectivity that they're going to use for their other business operations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pretty much in every show, there comes a point where I ask, okay, so what's this going to cost a credit union? And your answer, I think, would be, well, there's no direct cost to them.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
And I'd say, well, what's it costing Alchemy? And you say, well, why don't you ask Alchemy? So
probably so. It's a good answer.
But my point with this strange interlude here is the credit union doesn't need to be concerned about this, because I'm pretty sure the Alchemies of the world have done their bargain hunting and comparison shopping, and tried to negotiate the best price that they can. I mean, maybe I'm naive, but I'm pretty sure that's true.
That's exactly the case, right? It's a highly competitive marketplace. There's a number of different ways to solve this problem at a variety of cost levels, different technologies, and different levels of security. And we have to be competitive with all of those every day. And it's our goal, really. I mean, a key benefit we provide with the automation and with the software is to continue to drive down the cost of this connectivity for everyone's benefit.
Well, that's come on, that's the history of technology. It's I mean, I remember paying like $3,000 for an 8086 computer PC circa 1983. And I also remember paying $500 for a copy of WordStar. This was not a complete suite. There wasn't, Lotus wasn't packed into it. No. It was just WordStar.
I've heard it said, the cost of the computing for the Apollo space program, right, was tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. And yet the phone in your pocket just dwarfs that capability for, $1,000.
Hey, you don't have an iPhone, man. It's more like $2,000.
Before we go, think hard about how you can help support this podcast so we can do more interviews with more thoughtful leaders in the credit union world. What we're trying to figure out here in these podcasts is what's next for credit unions. What can they do to really, really, really make a difference in the financial scene? Can't all be mega banks, can it? It's my hope it won't all be mega banks. It'll always be a place for credit unions. That's what we're discussing here. So figure out how you can help. Get in touch with me. This is rjmcgarvey@gmail.com. Robert McGarvey. Again, that's rjmcgarvey@gmail.com. Get in touch. We'll figure out a way that you can help. We need your support. We want your support. We thank you for your support. The CU 2.0 podcast.